Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I'm glad to see everybody here. Yesterday afternoon, I wasn't expecting too many folks as everyone was clearing out. So James and I were taking a bet on how many folks would be here. So thanks for coming. Superior Silica Sands we're not Exxon, we're not Petrobras. We're one sand mine south of San Antonio that is really focused on, hey, how do you drive the business? And what's essential to us is partners. And in this endeavor we'll describe here, Augury is our partner, and James here has been working with us on this. But we'll go into this a little bit. So here's our agenda, pretty straight up. Basically, a little bit about the company, challenges, the solutions, lessons learned, benefits, and then kind of what's the next step. Whereas, like I said, we're sand mine south of San Antonio. We have two businesses. One is our oil and gas. Basically, we're making frac sand. And then our second business, our construction, sports, industrial. Ready mix, golf courses. Come to find out, golf courses use a lot of sand, let me tell you. And they use it all the time, too. And then, but these are two different businesses. These are two different businesses. And the reason we've been diversifying into the construction, sports, and industrial is the volatility of the frac business. And it is the wackiest business I've ever been in my whole career. So, pure commodity. Customers are running our sand and someone else's sand downhole simultaneously. Zero product differentiation, okay? Cost, super critical. They'll switch, and our units of measure is tons. So for 50 cents a ton, you can lose all your business in a second, okay? High month-to-month variability in our demand. And I'd really say it should be day-to-day, to be honest with you. I got a text this morning. Our sales, hey, just picked up business, starts tomorrow, 20% increase in production, which means we need to start increasing production now, like right now, so to hit it. And, there is really the biggest thing in mining and this whole processing is safety. And it's not just safety for safety's sake. We're not managed by OSHA, we're by MSHA. OSHA shows up at other plants I've run 2 hours, 1 day, one guy. MSHA shows up 3 days, 3 guys, 24 hours. And they started this because of the accidents, but this mine is the safest place I ever worked. We don't have accidents because they could be fatal, right? I mean, every now and then someone hits their finger with a hammer and all, but in general, this has been the super safetiest place and the most safety-driven culture. And when we were talking earlier this week about people and safety, it's all about how do we get that guy on the floor, in the mine, in the pit, to be super safe. Our construction, sports, industrial business, briefly, highly stable, long-term contracts, repeat business. You can plan on it. We're a frac, you can't. And the project we're going to go into is really all around our frac process. And that's roughly about 80% of our revenue. I broke it kind of the process flow. You dig the ore out of the mine. You take it to a place where we blend it with water and slurry it. We pump it about a mile to the wet plant. The wet plant washes the clay out of it and cuts the real coarse sand off of it. That goes to a big decant pile. That pile you're looking at is about 200,000 tons of sand sitting there. And then it drops, the moisture goes from like 18% down to around 5-6%. We feed that into our dry plant where the product is dried and screened. The sand is dried and screened, goes to the silo, shipped out the door. Our silo capacity is about a day and a half buffer. It's nothing in real terms, right? The tripper, that gives us, you need so much of that, but that's only about, when you're running at high rate, 5 days, 6 days production. Because some of that is static, you don't use it. But the key here is really kind of in this drying screening. The challenges we have there, a lot of input variables that drive that process, and most of those we don't control. You're the tail getting wagged by the dog on a lot of these. And so how do you make a process that is going to be very streamlined, that can handle a lot of variability and give us a more consistent outcome? And just the complexity of trying to control that with a person who, even with a person with low education or a person with high education. I don't do much better when I try and run that process myself, hands-on. Actually, they tell me, go home, all right? Get out of here. Like I talked about, large variations in production, but also in this commodity business, cost is super important because volatility in our pricing, in 30 days, our pricing can drop by 30%. And it's a very aggressive pricing up and down because everyone's trying to squeeze every little cent there. 1 year you'll see your margins, literally, your margin is a third of what it was a year or so ago. But the question is, how do you sustain yourself and how do you have a repeat business that you can run in that environment? And it's about good people, being safe, high quality, low cost, and really understanding what drives your business. It's in detail. Second thing, production goals, again, shift and literally daily, hourly. The ability to swing from sold out to basically minimize costs back to sold out in an hour or two, and having that flexibility in it to go smoothly is essential for success. That besides our natural gas consumption, that's what we drive these two dryers. Are about 250 ton an hour dryers, rotary kiln dryers, burning a lot of natural gas through there. That's a big cost driver along with maintenance costs in there. Maintenance is huge. Sand mines, what you learn is sand destroys everything. All our data is in the cloud because servers do not like sand. And that is really part of the drive. That is, because there's times when maintenance calls up and goes, well, we got to replace this part. And I go, what happened to it? And they're like, it's gone. It didn't break. It eroded away. So very different business I've been in. This is kind of a digital visualization of our drying process. Sand is fed in. You can control that conveyor belt. You control the feed rate of the sand. You have a burner there. You're setting how much energy are we putting into that process. That drum rotates around, has big flights just like your dryer has in it. And then the sand comes out, falls on this conveyor where we can reject it or we send it to the silos. And it goes to this bucket elevator into the hopper, into some screens, and then it goes to the silos. The operator, so the way we've been running this is some poor soul is looking at this thing, trying to basically optimize this. And the real thing which you really realize is he's looking at one temperature, that 216 up there, that's the temperature of the sand coming out of the dryer. Because if that number gets too low and that sand gets wet, it goes down, it goes to that bucket elevator, clogs that bucket elevator up, clogs the hopper up. Then he has to tell his colleagues on the shift to get their shovels and start shoveling sand. And he's not a popular guy, right? And so when you run it, you see instead of it being in this 220 range, that thing's running at 250, 260, because he's not gonna make his buddies unhappy, right? That's his focus. And part of our idea was like, how do we take that emotion out of there? And how do we really control that to minimize the gas, or in the case we're sold out, maximize our throughput in there? Because if he's running it too hot, we get limited by the temperature going into the bag house that basically limits our throughput. So we started a process with Augury this third quarter last year. The focus is really how do we maximize our throughput, we want to minimize our costs, and really control that process in this very dynamic, changing process. We spent a lot of time really getting Augury up to speed to understand the process, understand the variables, understand the drivers and that drive that. And I would say, as we look at future projects, we'll spend more time here. Because if any error here just gets magnified through the whole process, right? So the next step was, once we had the data, build the AI model that's learning from it, and then it starts optimizing that process. And this doesn't end. You're continually learning because we're continually trying to improve the process outside of the software, the physical process, and the system needs to learn to do that. And then lastly, really the goal here is how do we get to where we can close that loop and let the machine run it? If the operator's standing there and he's just doing exactly what the system's telling him, at some point we can close that. Our goal here with this AI isn't to eliminate people, even though probably over some time we'll basically reduce someone. And it isn't to take the mundane task and let people do more. It's about to run it safer, smoother, and a consistent process. That's what we're about. So the system's monitoring the key variables coming in. Basically, like I said, we have all the data in the cloud. Augury ties into our data historian. They're getting the data to do that. And basically, this is the screen of like, what are really the key variables? And as it's learned, it's basically kind of going, then it gives us recommendations. Like here, it's saying, hey, you're running a little bit hot. You're not at through, we're basically optimizing costs. You need to reduce your burn rate, how much energy we're putting in. Because you can save some, and it's not, and what we've done here over time, we've significantly improved this process. And now we're down to how do you squeeze that last 5-10% out of it? And you can't do it as a person. It's too dang complex, right? And it's just the reality of it. And like I said, I spent a lot of time trying to do this, and it's on my own and running it. You can't. And you can be the smartest guy in the world. You still can't do it. So the focus here, like I said, is really, and the other thing that you get from this, people don't need data. They don't need information. They need recommendations. And at the end of the day, because you give them all that data, you need that data to drive the system, but you want to give people recommendations. And again, we want to put someone on here. He maybe finished high school. He's running this huge process. And so you're not going to just cut him loose. We've been there. We tried that. That worked. Sometimes they crash the thing. But it's like, give him recommendations, let him be involved. He'll build the confidence, and then he'll use the system, and we'll run better. A key thing we did early on, which was first, it took a little convincing to get me there, because I'm saying, hey, we do this, we're investing in this, we're going to use it. But for the first period, we said, look, it's up to the operator if he's going to accept the recommendation, reject it, or implement it. And if he doesn't, then he needs to say, okay, why? Right, tell me why you're not doing this. This was super rich for our learning, because sometimes the answer was, he needs more training. He needs someone sitting next to him, help him to understand why we're doing this. Other times the operator's like, I'm running 2 lines, they're measuring the same thing, and I got a 5-7% difference between them. I don't have confidence. I don't trust the data. So I'm not going to run to the optimal point and put myself at risk of clogging the system up. And lastly, too, sometimes we're sitting there going, recently we made some improvements. We were taking the dryers to a higher operating state that the model hadn't been trained in. And so the model's going, whoa, slow down. And the operators are like, no. And so that's part of, and I'm sure there's a few other there, but those were our 3 main groups of why that operator wasn't using it. So you're looking at like a 50% execution. Even with a 50% execution, let me show you the results. So we increased our throughput when we're sold out by about 7%. And that's a lot. That's over $1 million a year. And in our business, that's more than beer money there. That's real money. So, we'll take that to the bank. And then basically when we're not sold out, we reduced our gas consumption. Helps on emissions, but the driver here is costs. In this segment of the business, they don't pay you any value for what your emission reduction are. It's more of a personal thing, like, hey, let's run cleaner here. Faster response to that in-feed variability made the process smoother, where that operator would see moisture increase, and then he's slowing it down and jamming the thing back and forth. This kept it really streamlined. And that's probably one of those things we weren't expecting, and it's a nice benefit because, no process likes to be slammed up and down. It usually causes more maintenance failures. Improved data accuracy in the sensors, accuracy that we're seeing just in general, once people have more confidence in that data and seeing this is where we're really at, we're not over somewhere in here, we're somewhere in here. And it was just huge. We definitely are starting to see some lower trending maintenance costs because the process runs smooth. This process was running pretty smooth, and now we've even refined it more. Its uptime on the dryers is over 95%. I mean, it's best process ever been run in my career, how that thing runs. Improving operator engagement, let them be part of it, let them have the option to reject it, let them be part of the development improvement. And then when you're onboarding, you're putting guardrails up. So you're bringing a new guy on, and you're like, just do what the thing tells you to do, and we'll be fine. If you see this, then this is emergency. But that's been huge. We have some turnover. We try and minimize turnover, but you're going to have turnover. And when you're bringing people on, we have basically 4 guys running this process we run 4 shifts. We have 4 person on a shift. And eventually they're going to turn over, so onboarding is critical. And then lastly, having the system, having the data, and making sure our data's been good. It's been a long 3-year journey to get there, but that way the system's learning from all the data, not just the last week's data, even though that's a high driver in that. Lessons learned. Start off with a really clear goal in mind. Don't be fuzzy. Don't say we want to go north. Sit there and say, look, this is all about maximize throughput when we're sold out, minimize costs when we're not, and give us the flexibility to switch on the fly in between. Critical and essential. I got to say, this was one of those areas we've been running this process with the same sensors, same data for a long time. Now, once you want to squeeze the band down, some of our sensors they had drift, man. They're drifting 5-7% all the time. And it was like, we got to change those sensors. And we've gone from thermocouples to pyrometers. We've changed our moisture sensors. Basically, this is what we had to do to enable the AI to work. And even on the data integrity, calibration, where we were like, calibrate monthly, you're getting a 5-7% drift again on our belt scales, which are not precision devices, but they're the best out there that you have. So you can't upgrade it, but you sure can calibrate it and keep that band down to a narrow bit. And there's other things we've done, but it was really, I think our team started with here's the data. Okay, Augury, you go figure it out. And then we quickly got to a point hey, this is on both of us to go make this happen, and it requires everybody committed to it. Data latency, just really previous companies I worked in, you had to go through so many hoops and errors. They just created so much latency in the process it would never work. We're plugging them right into our historian in the cloud. That cuts that latency down, and it gives back the feedback that they need to be able to run the process. Engagement, we've talked about it all week, right? Super. I do think there's a bottom up and a top down. But for me, the top down is this is what we're going to do, folks, and we're going to go make this happen. But if it's not happening, then together we're going to decide we're pulling it and we're chunking it. And we in a small business, you don't have years to work on something. You need to get on it. It either works and we're all focused on it. And if it's not working, then we go to something else. Move on, right? So setting and really enforcing those expectations for our team and the partners team. Project teams being consistent. Don't be changing people all the time. That just creates total chaos in there, and you restart the whole trust cycle there. Having all our operators, you can start with a key user, but you got 4 guys on shift running it, and you're only talking to one of them. That's not a recipe for success. And so our weakest operator just set a new production record last week. And he's the guy that's really kind of come along, but the other guys are helping him to do that. And then exploring opportunities for improvement opens the door up to where can we improve and make the whole process better. Trusting the software. If you're going to put it in, use it. If it's failing, take it out, right? It's just simple as that. Setting the expectations that, okay, guys, we have this period, you can reject this, but at the end of this period, this is not an option for you, right? You're going to go do it. Or you're going to explain and convince us we're taking it out. And it's real simple. And if it doesn't work, we'll take it out. No problem, because we don't want it in there either. That, like I said, that allowing the operators flexibility, I kind of talked about that. That was huge. It also, they're still accountable. The software is there to enable them to be successful. They're accountable. If it doesn't run, they don't do their job, that's their job, and we want to hold them to it. Also, too, for the process to learn, it needs to be stable. You need to leave it alone. You need to let it do its thing. You need to follow its recommendations, then it's going to learn. If we're jacking around, adding a lot of noise in there, that's not going to get us successful. Communication, and I think when we talk about data, thinking about data in the cloud, the server, there's also a whole lot of soft data that needs to be communicated. and captured, but especially communicated. When the augury guy working on the project's like, they're not putting in our recommendations, these guys aren't doing their thing. When they start communicating, they're like, well, the data is off and we don't feel comfortable. Oh, okay, fine, right? We can do that. But that I said, through that whole process, starting at top level all the way down is essential for success. Lastly, this was an experiment. If you're looking for something in my life, if we're looking for something that's 100% guarantee, it ain't there. So if you take the stand, this is an experiment, experiments are messy. You're going to fail. But to get through and get to the other side, you got to persevere. And we're going to persevere. We're going to make it happen. So next steps for us. Basically deploy the process navigator from the first driver to the second dryer, get both dryers running on that. That's easy. If you remember back, we had our slurry and our wet process. This is like 10 times more complex than the drying process. We're going to choke on the drying process. You don't even want to start there. But now we're like, okay, let's look at it. Let's start there. You're looking at, pumps, screen, just way more level of complexity. But I think we really have a foundation. We will spend a whole lot of time understanding that process and getting that process modeled, because that's going to be tough, right? The optimizing the process, and then now it's just continuous improvement, running along through the track, and then eventually moving into where we can fully automate this and control this. So, it's been a really interesting journey. It's kind of part of our total digital journey. We're using AI in our AP process. We're using it in our maintenance process. We're using it in operations. And part of the message, I'm sitting here this week, it's like, hey, there's a lot of small, medium-sized companies that are out there doing a lot of good stuff that can really benefit from this even further. And, don't miss out on that opportunity. And there you can make a decision like that, So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.